Huge mistakes when it comes to compliance that can add up to $5,000, $10,000, or even $50,000 fines.
Welcome to the LO Code Podcast, where we talk about everything from marketing to just general loan bullshit.
On today's episode of the LO Code Podcast, we're going to be talking about huge mistakes when it comes to compliance that can add up to $5,000, $10,000, or even $50,000 fines. We do not want this to happen, so I have a special guest on today, Jason Fraser. Jason, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, man. I'm sure everyone's number one topic is compliance. It's the sexiest thing you could ever talk about. So
I love it.
But yeah, man, I'm excited to be here and talk about it because it's actually something that's very important right now with all the crap flying around. So
exactly. And so a lot of us are out pushing marketing. I've done marketing for many years now, but more people are putting their toe in the water and they're putting things out there on social. And you were one of the first people I saw that are calling out a lot of the non-compliant pieces of content, whether it's an image or it's a video. And so I just wanted to dive into the whole, compliance side. And to preface, we are not compliance lawyers. You always need to, reference or speak to your compliance department before you post anything. It's always going to be on the individual LO or the mortgage company to decide what they're going to post. They can't rely on a third party unless they're using a compliance company or lawyer to handle that for them. So let's dig in. What are some of the big no-nos that you see that people are doing that they have no idea that they're doing wrong?
yeah, I think, and I don't know when it happened. I mean, there's a lot of different things. One is just you got to be careful with like your disclaimers, right? Depending on what you're talking about. The one that I'm seeing the most is not having APRs because everyone thinks just because, hey, I'm sharing something that's hypothetical, it's not like a real scenario, that the compliance doesn't matter. And there is no scenario within compliance when it comes to what you have to do under, whether it's TILA, RESPA, or whatnot. Is you got to make sure that you have the proper disclosures and that you're saying the right things. And look, for those that know me, like from a marketing perspective, you're going to find someone. I will take it. I will bend, but don't break when it comes to compliance, right? So I'm not ultra conservative. I have been on the bad side of almost every chief compliance officer I've worked with the exception of a couple. And it's not that they're bad. It's just like, they want to protect the organization. They want to protect themselves. And I would say is one is not understanding what the trigger terms are, thinking that you could only talk about rate or other like down payments and stuff like that when, there's creative ways to do it. But, from a mistake, one is mindset. So that's the biggest mistake I see is mindset, because what I hear all the time is, well, how often does that happen? Or what are the chances of me getting dinged? And I'm like, it depends. I'm like, I've seen a lot. And let me ask you, do you want to be the first? Right. Because at some point, someone is always the first. And some of these fines are big. I've been on the bad side of enforcement actions. I've been on the bad side. Now these are things that I didn't control, that I didn't create, but I've had loan officers that have went rogue, and I've been on the bad side of 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 fines. And, and this year dealing with enforcement and compliance issues. So, the mistake they think is that it's not, you will have certain states, you will have, what are they like the secret shoppers, right? Going through, looking at social media or going through your online process or whatever. We've already seen a lot of that in the media where, it comes from like, fair housing, right? Is all secret shoppers. So they are out there doing that. But what people don't really understand is that a majority of the time when someone gets, dinged, it's because it was from a competitor or an upset agent, consumer, a disgruntled employee, right? So you think that might happen in an environment where, a lot of people are getting laid off? Do you think that might happen in an environment where you have, everyone just trying to, they see you with an agent and they're like, man, that agent's doing great, so I'm just going to, I think they're doing illegal stuff with their events or whatever. So like, that's what people need to understand, is that, outside of the mistakes they make just by not being compliant and disclaimers and APR and simple stuff like that, just the mistake is thinking that it's not going to happen to you. And, and when
Right.
I posted recently, this is kind of how this conversation came up. One of the comments in there was just saying, one of the guys was like, yeah, I just went through it, had to deal with that, but I just went through it. And I had a friend that just went just, and I want to say it was like a $10,000 fine. So it's
Wow.
just like, you're not going to hear them. People think that, hey, I never heard of it. It's like the Housing Wire, and doesn't say every enforcement action or every fine that happens across the country, right? Like, it happens all the time, and just because you don't
Hmm.
see it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen to you.
Exactly. And so let's say best case scenario, you have to delete every piece of content that you've ever made on your social media. Like that's best case, right? If you get in trouble. Worst case is you're going to get fined for every infraction. And so what I usually recommend is bare minimum. You need to have your NMLS number on every piece of content. And that's really just like not going to protect you all the way. So what we do is we put, like, on all our videos, we have like an ending card, and I shared this with you on social media, that has all of the compliance information that would be on your website, fair housing lender logo on there, so that we're protecting ourselves. But like you said, if you bring up trigger terms, that still is not enough. So let's go through some scenarios where people think they're okay, and I'm going to throw some stuff at you, and you tell me if it's okay, if it's not, and then what you have to do.
Sure.
So let's say we're talking about the buy down programs, 2-1, 3-2-1, and someone says, "Hey, we have a special buy down program where rates are starting in the threes. Contact me if you want more information." Is that a trigger?
Yes. So anytime that, because that's an advert contact, because you're giving them a call to action, right? So, and look, we could debate all day long on what constitutes an advertisement or not, or whatnot, but that is an advertisement. Anything that you're putting, anything that's consumer facing is from. And look, I look at these things through the lens of an auditor going through a lot of audits, state and federal. I look through the lens of what an auditor, because at the end of the day, it's their perception and their opinion is the only thing that matters. Only thing that matters is their opinion. So
Right.
if you're doing a video and you're talking about that, you better have some sort of language on like the bottom of that video. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's where I see it all the time. Like, I don't even see NMLS IDs on these videos that a lot of people are doing on TikTok and Reels, because they think, hey, it's real, it's TikTok, it's a TikTok. It doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. And so you need to put your stuff on there. But like, hey, if the 2-1 buy down, like rates start in the threes, yeah, like, have something when look, you could find a million caption apps right now, or a video editor. Have that down there when you're saying it. Just have it down there and just say what the APR is, or based off of like, hey, not everyone qualifies. Based off that, contact me for the exact scenario, hypothetical scenario, whatever, and just have enough in there so that, because look, auditors are humans too, right? Unless they're in Washington, then they're robots. But auditors are humans too, and I'm just talking about the state of Washington. And so it also matters what your intent was, right? So that
Right.
if you did make a best effort to be compliant, they're not, in my experience at least, they're not going to ding you for like the little small stuff, because like, hey, look, I did, my intent was good. I did make an effort to do the proper disclaimer. If I left out some verbiage in there, generally what that results in is like, hey, fix this, take down the advertisement, take down the video, take whatever, and then just make sure you do that. So a lot of times that's what's happened. But when you make no effort at all, is when you're going to be is when you're going to run into issues. But to your point,
Right.
yes, that would be something that you would need a disclosure on.
So now let's get creative, right? So we're going to go through what triggers and then what you can do to not have to worry about triggering. So how about if we did something like this? Rates are super high right now, but there is a select group of people that are getting a much lower rate for the first 3 to 2 or even 1 years leading up to their mortgage payments changing. There's a special buy down program. If you want to learn how you could lower your rate for the first few years, reach out for more information.
Yeah. So that actually probably wouldn't, because that's pretty general. That wouldn't, in my opinion, again, this is all like my advice off of my
Right.
experience and stuff like that, that wouldn't constitute a disclosure just because of the way that you spoke in it. Now, I would, it's, it, it's kind of on the fringe because you're actually giving an actual like number of like for years, because you're actually giving like, like number of like a term, right? So then sometimes you might have to put something there. Now, even with that, yes, the normal stuff that we've talked about as far as like having your NMLS ID and that type of stuff, that's a given no matter what piece of content you're putting out there. To that point, what I would say is I would be more of like buy down. I'm sure you've heard of the buy down. And did you know that a lot of people have a very, very high rate right now when it comes to what's out there in the market, but I have a lower rate. And so you don't have to put it, because you're not giving like, hey, I'm a percent low or whatever. It's when it's like, so you're kind of walking a fine line with like when you're giving like, hey, for the first year, second year, because then you're going into like terms. But it's just like, did you know that generally, and it's not for the whole length of the mortgage, right? So you could kind of play some games with that a little bit with just what you're saying on there without getting specific. And actually, and this is what I talked about in my post, is like, you could be creative with that, right? Get them asking you a little bit more. You don't have to put every single thing out there, because what are you giving them to contact you for? If you're giving every little bit of information out there about the 2-1, how it works and all that other stuff, be an educator, right? But at the same time, something like that, I think with what you just said verbatim, I would say that you would not have to put a disclosure on there, because it was pretty general and you weren't talking specifics.
Right. And that's how I think in my marketing is when you're doing marketing to create a response. So someone reach out to you, you have to give them a reason, like you said. So you're going to get them excited about an opportunity, but to learn more about it, they need to contact you. But in the grand scheme of things, they need to contact you whether you gave them the whole rundown, because their scenario is going to be different. So why put yourself in that position where you could be saying something wrong and probably have less people reach out to you? Then just cut all of that out and have more people contacting you, give you more at bats.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, and the cool thing is, if you see bad marketing when it comes to 2-1 or whatever out there, you could use that and almost use that as a lead magnet without actually having to do the compliance yourself. Right. And look, the more conservative compliance officer and people out there would disagree with me on this. But like, for example, is like, hey, did you see this flyer when they're talking about, rates and this and that? What are they even talking about? You know what? I'm in the business and I get just as confused as you are. So contact me today and I'll tell you exactly how this program works. So you're actually kind of giving a visual of someone else, right, putting that information out there, but you don't have to put APR or any disclosures on that, because you're actually saying like, hey, I'm confused. I don't even know what this means. Contact me today, whatever. Obviously you have the normal, compliance stuff on there, like we mentioned, like NMLS ID. But you can actually, because you're basically, you're not using someone else's marketing. It's a way that I've been creative with marketing, and I've gone through audits on this. I've given that exact scenario over to auditors before, and not once has it ever been questioned, because I'm not using it as my own advertising. I'm using it as an educational piece, and I'm not quoting rates or saying product program and products. Now,
and when you
with that
did
being
that,
said,
did you
I'm sorry.
not you did not include the person that posted that, just what they posted?
I basically blurred out some stuff and I'm like, have you seen that? Like, whatever. And I blurred out, did like the black, like marker over, using like, Photoshop or whatever, so that it was that. Have you seen that stuff? And I've used that as creative marketing to actually get through that impact that a lot of people are looking for, saying, hey, it creates engagement. It's an impactful piece. Great. But there's a different way to use that so that you're not. Now, if you did that saying, hey, I could do exactly this, then you're using that as your own advertisement. So if you see what I said, as far as like the verbiage and how I put it, as opposed to using it saying like, I don't know what this means. That's where you're playing a little bit more of those games with your verbiage, trigger terms, and being creative with your marketing, but you're still getting that same push. You know what I mean? You're still getting that same push. And we've actually seen examples, right? We all know that meme that's going around saying, hey, the house was 450, now it was 5, with 6%, 4.5% rate, right? It's on TikTok, it's everywhere, right? So what did some people do? They use that flyer, then they put the compliant version of it, right, and had it on there. So now, you know what I mean? So they're doing the same thing, and then adding their disclaimer, because they put their own thing on there. But I've seen other people use it where they've marked it out, like say wrong math, and they didn't put any APR or anything, That is 100% compliant piece because they are pointing out a mistake and they're not using it as in like, hey, contact me because these number, whatever. So that is like my exact example is they are still getting the impact from that piece. They're still getting the impact for what people is going to create engagement or conversations, but they did it in a compliant way because of the way that they portrayed it. And so that is an easy conversation with the auditor should they get dinged for it. But again, it only opinion matters as the auditor, but that's how you do things like that. You got to get creative instead of just being a lemming and doing like what everyone else is doing and reposting and share it. It just amazes me because look, if you're a mortgage professional and numbers are important, right? Like, why would you not want to just take the time, do that same flyer, but just make the math right? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, why would you not want to do that?
Right. No, that's good. So the next thing that we see is when you're highlighting a agent's listing and you're just giving general information of like, hey, here's a list of what down payments would look like. And we had this discussion. You said if you have any map that goes into down payments or payments, you have to have a full disclosure of a rate of an APR. Even if you don't even say anything about payment or rate, if you start talking down payment, that could trigger the auditor saying, well, you need more context and you have to have disclosures.
Yeah. So like if you just mention down payment, anytime there, and it's, so this is what's hilarious about it. And look, let's not pretend that, the Tilla and RESPA aren't a black bag because they are, right? It was done a long time ago, but it was done for a very specific reason. And so when I get into debates with loan officers, like, look, I agree with you. It's stupid because here's the thing. The only reason that a loan officer does anything with an agent, anything compliant or not, is to get business from said agent, right? Anything, right? So we could find games and ways to make it compliant, but at the end of the day, it's the same thing. That's what RESPA was made to stop, right? Well, technically it was made for like pay to play, but the point is that like that it's a thing of value. Everything's a thing of value. Educate, everything's a thing of value, and the only reason you spend your time doing any of that is to get business from agents, right? So we could all agree that look, there needs to be, and it was purposely made the way it is to where it's it's interpretation, right? That's really what it is. And so it would be great if they just spelled out like, hey, don't do these 5 things, right? And then anything that isn't these 5 things, go crazy, right? So, and the reason I'm saying all that is just to get you in the mindset, because technically when you say down payment, it will literally say within the regulations that you have to mention the disclosure of what the down payment is, even when there is no down payment. So you literally just put in that disclosure that I'm talking like textbook compliance here. You literally have to put that I had just said there's no down payment. Well, you have to put it in disclosure of what the down payment is. I've had this debate with compliance officers before. And look, and that's just what it is. So when I said that when you put down payment, you technically have to put a disclosure about how much the down payment is, even if it's 0, right? So like, so that's the funny thing about that. Now, when you're doing a listing and you're doing like, I don't know, like, the grid, like the scenario grid on the back or on the bottom of something of said payments, and you got to add APR, you got to have the disclosures, and to be like, above board, what you really want to do is have, and I have this, I have it's the Expert Mortgage Marketing Compliance Facebook group. Anyone can join it and I'll be happy to and it's free. There's it's just a free service that I do, because one is I see this too often and I'm seeing everyone getting a little bit lazy because everyone wants to fill their pipeline. But there is just a standard disclosure that generally covers everything. And what it is the only 2 things that you have to put in there is generally, it works great for the buy downs too, is basically you put in the credit score, like, hey, this hypothetical scenario is based off of a credit score of 760, 727, whatever it is, and rates as of this date, right? And put that on there. And so, and even if the date is a month old, as long as you put it on there, right? Like you're okay. Now you want it to be as up to date as possible. So every time you generate the flyer, you should put whatever the current date is. Keep that credit score the same, withstanding like whatever, whatever is in there. So that, it's a general, simple disclosure to put in there, but that's how you're doing it safely when you're doing any type of loan center. And I'm seeing this too often. People trying to get it, again, trying to be creative and play games with just like, oh, it's on the UWM calculator, and like, hey, they're posting the calculator. Well, it's a calculator. Calculator isn't going to have that. It's not advertising. They're not going to have the APR. They're not going to have the disclosures on there. So, but at the same time, you can't then. They're like, well, look, you just said it's in the calculator. There is no compliance on there. True, but when you copy and paste that and then put it into a flyer, then it is an advertising. Then you need to have disclosures. Then you need to have APR. So like, look, I get it. It's a pain in the butt, but you don't have to, it doesn't have to be that hard. Right. And again, I've worked with some lenders that are beyond conservative on their marketing, and you can't do anything right outside, like, then there's ones that are a little bit, again, like I said, I'm more of, bend as far as you can without breaking it. But at the end of the day, it depends on what the appetite of risk is. The chances of getting in trouble, yes, they're very rare, but I'll tell you, there's some people that have had $1 million fines or their license completely pulled, because they took that risk. And so the question you got to ask yourself is, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Exactly. And so this would go into the other ones I'm seeing, which is you need to make X amount of money to afford this house. So you're into a scenario that's going to be based off of credit, that's going to be based off of down payment, that's going to be based off of rate. So if you're going to do that, you got to do the whole shebang, and it has to be on there at some point. And it's a bummer, right? Like, nobody wants to do that. You're just trying to get general information to get people, some knowledgeable, getting you to ask questions. But if we're not going to go and put that in there, then you're risking the fines, you're risking the issues. So if you don't want to do all that, then just don't do that type of a flyer or a video or a content piece.
That's what it comes down to. Like, if you're going to do it, just take the time to do it right. And it doesn't have to be, your video that you sent me was perfect. And if you look at some of the top lenders, whenever they do those videos like that, whether it's a TikTok or a reel or anything, that last panel in that video is the terms that they talked about. And look, they flash by. It's like the guy on the radio, right? When you hear mortgage, ads on the radio and stuff like that. And the whole like legalese, the guy that like speaks super fast, right? The micro machines guy, like, that's it just has to be there, right? And so it doesn't always have to, like, oh, it ruins the marketing. Just have it at the end, right? It's just like, hey, I
last 3 seconds or so, 3 to 5 seconds is where
right.
I put it.
Just have it at the end. You already got your message apart. In fact, they probably already scanned past before they even got to that point. So you just have it. But as long as you can show the auditors
if I have
to, yeah,
right? Like at the end, if I have other stuff I want on there, I'll just cover my head, my face. Like, I mean, you got to do what you got to do, right? Like, you have to put it up there but here's another thing. You don't want to put it at the very end for another 3 to 5 seconds, because then you're going to kill your reach on these platforms. These reach are based off of full watch through, and they really like it when people watch it multiple times. So if you leave it to the very end, you risk the algorithms hurting you. So I just have it over what I'm saying the last few seconds. If you want to have it at the end, you can. Is it going to impact most people? Probably not. But if you're trying to squeeze every little last bit out of the algorithms, then you want to have that overlaid as you're speaking at the end. Even stuff that I turn into paid ads, that pops up and it's hanging out up there as we have our call to action, click the button, whatever, just to be safe, just to have it there.
Yeah. And if you want to have fun with it, just be like, have a ticker. Just scroll it on by real quick, right? You know what I mean? Like, hey, legalese, and just point down to it. Have some fun with it. The disclaimers and stuff that are in there or whatnot. There's just a lot of ways to be creative with your marketing. But look, we always want to do what's easy. We don't want to, take the time to do all this other stuff. We just want to, just do it and be done. And it's hard just pulling teeth to get people to just do video in general. So I get it, but like what I said in all the posts that I've done recently on this is that this isn't the time to having the shell out extra money, and people are going to be petty. There is going to be a competitor so the last enforcement action I had to go through was exactly that. someone sent them a lunch and learn flyer or some stupid thing, and so I had to deal with that. You know what I mean? Like, and
Mhm.
we were going to be in the wrong. It
Right.
absolutely. Now this was something that I didn't approve or do, had I looked at it prior, I would have absolutely not allowed that to go out, because I would have known that that would have been a problem should it ever come to attention, or during an audit when we have to.
So did that
um
turn into a fine, or was it just, hey, don't do that again?
Oh, it's still going on, but it absolutely will
Okay.
turn into a fine.
It will
Look,
turn
they
into.
weren't accepting any type. And look, I could spin pretty damn good. Like, I could spin a good, rebuttal on something like that. And they weren't having any of it. Um, so yeah, but there's only so far you could go. Like I said, I'll bend until
Right.
I get, not break, but it's tough.
Right. I like that idea of a ticker. So if at the bottom it's just scrolling and then by the end of the video it gets through all of your stuff, you think that would be fine.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
doesn't
As
all
long
have
as
to
you're
be
putting it
there
on
in
there.
one
Yeah.
spot. They just
Yeah.
now
Good.
here's where we're starting to split hairs, and it probably doesn't matter, but on a lot of these platforms, there's spots where it's covered up by buttons, it's covered up by text. If you have it on there, but it's covered up by all these buttons, does that matter because it's on the original video? What do you think about that?
I think there's enough there, because again, it's the best effort, right? The intent of what I did. Like, oh, I did it on my video or whatever. Like, I didn't know. I don't realize that. I don't look at my video from a consumer standpoint, meaning like I look what I saw, and when I saw there, it's not covered up by anything, right?
Right.
So to me,
And
there's
sometimes they
enough.
crop, right? You put it in certain phones, crop stuff in, and you're missing some stuff. So
Again,
it
it's like, hey, what was the intent? Did they make did they make a best effort to be compliant? And if the answer, and that's really what they're looking for.
mhm.
And as long as you are, you're generally gonna be okay, right? And again, it depends. Well, here's an example of where it wasn't okay to that exact standpoint. And again, state of Washington, worst state for compliance, hands down. But this was a long time ago, but just to give you an idea of how silly it could get sometimes, and why I am the way I am, is that this was when Google Plus was a thing, right? And so when you were doing a Google account, you automatically got a Google Plus page, right? Now, Google Plus, for those of you who don't remember, was Google's, like, I think, third attempt at trying to make some sort of social media network for Google, and it was horrible every single time they've tried it. It's horrible. So hopefully we don't get another one of those. But you automatically, it created a profile page of you, right? So now, and it's Google. So what does that mean? It means it's found when someone searches your name and searches your name and mortgage, right? Because you create it create your Google account, it creates your profile, and you put it, just has your information on there. We were doing at the time, and geez, this was probably 2016 ish, maybe 27. It's probably 2016, I'd imagine. And we got audited, and we got dinged for like 15 LOs for it, and it's because it created it. And they're like, there's no NMLS ID, there's no state license. I'm like, I don't like, they don't even know these things exist. There's no call to actions, there's no links, there's no email, there's no phone number. It is simply their name, right? But because it
Mhm.
attaches to like their Google My Business and stuff, there's a mortgage connection there. And so we got dinged, and we're trying to say, like, look, like, these are just created automatically by Google. They don't even know these exist. We don't even know these exist, right? And so, like, we had our Google, like the Google Plus, the listing page, that was all compliant, but because the way Google did it and made their account like a personal deal, right? That
Mhm.
was basically the foundation of how they built that. You were supposed to, and I said, look, and I even took it through. I'm like, there's no way to put that information in there. It's their name. And so, like, I think it was their first time ever like seeing that. But the point is that it was something that was brought up, and we were dinged for. And thankfully at the end, smarter heads prevailed to say, like, look, there was no intent there, and there's no way to advertise. So, like, what are they like? So what? They saw their little profile page, they can't click to anything, they can't
Right.
go anywhere, they're gonna have to re-Google to find out where they're at. So, like, that was one of many, but that was the one that was like really took the cake. Is like they really are like just looking for stupid stuff sometimes, right?
Right.
And to me is a, you know, the way I look at it and the way I addressed it with them, I said, where is where is our intent to harm the consumer or to, you know, put forth any type of, because we can't even market to it, can't even
Right.
advertise on it. Where was our intent to mislead the consumer or to harm the consumer? Right. If that's really what these regulations are for, where is that in this? And so, you know, that was part of, but guess what? They didn't accept that in the beginning. Like we went back and forth. This was like a 3-month exam on these little subjects. And because we said we literally cannot fix it. There was no Google support to like try to, you know what I mean? Like there was no apparatus to try to fix any of that. And
Right.
so, you know, it was just one of those things, but I use that as an example so people really understand of how silly these things can get. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter the logic in it, because
Right.
like I said, the logic is you only do anything with an
Just
agent
what
because
they
you want to get
decide.
business. But you know, there is no logic in it. But the point is that you and I could agree that it was stupid, but at the end of the day, it only matters what the auditor's opinion is
Right.
of whether that is an enforceable fine or not.
No, that makes sense. Okay, so to end this out, let's talk about no words, words you just cannot say. Cannot say best. You cannot say lowest. Are there any other ones that you see that people should just not use?
Yeah, so you can say better and you can
Better.
say lower, but you cannot say. I'm glad you brought that up. You can't
Yeah.
say best
You
or
can say
low. Like,
great. I
it's
can get you a
great.
great deal. I
Yeah,
can't get you the best deal because
yeah,
what is the
yeah.
best?
But yeah, so that's the thing with it, right? So here's what I always say is like trigger terms. You could Google them and see what it is. There's really not a lot of, right, and there is a really good you know, there is really good ways of saying, you know, like, hey, don't say best, say better, right? So one is here's where you will get dinged with agents. Don't say preferred lender, right? Those are two no-nos. I see still people do it a lot, but do not say preferred lender, preferred partner, right? Sometimes you can't even say partner, right?
Right.
So like just be careful with stuff like that. But stay away from the trigger terms. Like, you know, the no-nos are just, look, it really just depends. But I mean, you kind of brought them up, is you can't make a definite claim
Right.
that really can't be verified. And I just
Right.
had this debate with a broker and they're like, well, I could show all that. I'm like, you can, but like, that's not in your flyer. That's not in your
Right.
advertisement. I agree with you. You can do all of that. You are 100% right. You are, you know, I said, dude, if we checked your pricing, I'm sure you're probably like 120 bips better, right? But I can tell you right now, none of that is going to matter, right? So like, you cannot put out there as a defendant state that you are the best. So okay, I'm glad you brought this up because again, do you want to hear another thing that we got dinged on, right? This almost made like my head explode, right? Legit, we got dinged for our testimonials, right? Our
Really?
testimonials, yes, right? And guess what state? Washington, right? So I can say this now that I'm not a lender anymore, so you know, who cares? But here's the thing. Washington, they said, oh, the testimonials say that they got the best rate from you, and they can't, and you can't say that. And I'm like, so, or are we supposed to like, you know, are we, you know, supposed to like moderate what they're telling? If they went to 5 different people and we had the best
So this
rate,
was like a
that
Google review.
this was a Google review, legit. And I'm like, that's a statement of fact, right? They went to 5 different people. It says it in their review. They went to 5 different people and they said we had the best rate, right? Are we supposed to moderate that now? Like,
Right.
are we supposed to
You
say
didn't
like
say
you
the best
can't?
rate in the world. You had the best rate out of the five.
They had
That's
a
a
best
fact.
rate out of everyone that they saw, and that was a statement of fact from their lens. And
Right.
so we even said that we're like, look, that is ridiculous. We can't. So what it ended up being is the compromise was then what we did was instead of, because like they were not going to censor our freaking testimonials. That's just stupid. And again, shows you how lame things can get.
Right.
So the compromise is that and I think we were using experience.com or testimonial tree. So one of those services. So the compromise is that we wouldn't automatically post those reviews on our website and social media. So we would then curate that to remove that when we posted it on social media. So that was the compromise that we had.
So if it's up on Google, there's nothing you can do about it. But if
Nothing
you're
we
going
could
to
do. We
repost
were
something,
okay. Yeah, but
it has to have all clean verbiage. Can't have anything
so
that
basically what they were saying is like, hey, you got to censor your reviews to say definitive statements like that, right? And so people that you guys are listening to this, I get it. Like right now, if you're a loan officer, you're listening to this,
you're
like,
in there like photoshopping best for great.
yeah, they're like, oh my god,
but then,
how
then if you
stupid
do that, is that legal? Because now you're altering a review.
Get it? Look, I get it. From a loan officer, you don't want to say,
gosh.
you don't like the word no, right? So you're always trying to find, right? It's like water on pavement. You're always trying a way to get that deal done. I get it. That's in your DNA. But again, at the end of the day, compliance, it doesn't really matter. Like you have to be compliant. But and I get it. Like I will never debate the merits of that being an okay thing to say. So like I get it. I'm on your side. I've made a career out of being on your side, trying to make your marketing work and being compliant. So like I get it, but at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of laziness happening right now of just sharing this stuff, not checking accuracy, not putting your NMLS ID on TikToks and Reels and stuff like that. Just you're talking about mortgage stuff. You have to be compliant because you are going to end up paying. You're going to end up be paying a ton of money for a $5 crime, and it's just not worth it.
Exactly. No, that's all good stuff. And just circling back, we do a lot of video for a lot of people. And with that being said, if you're using services that are doing your stuff for you, you can't rely on them to know all these things. Even if they are in the space, most people are going to do what the client wants. If you say, hey, make this video, if you have a trigger in there, you have to make sure that you're reviewing your end product, because at the end of the day, it's going to come down on the individual loan officer and the individual company. So I do my best to try to audit everything that I see to help our people out. But everyone needs to take responsibility for what they're putting out before they put it, because the rubber meets the road with you at the end of the day. So just be safe. Make sure, especially if you're having automated stuff go out that other people are curating for you, you still need to review all that to make sure that there's nothing in there that's going to be a trigger term or have an issue.
Oh yeah, and I'm glad you said, because there is no passing the buck in the eyes of auditors, meaning like you are 100% responsible for every vendor, every service provider, anybody. You are responsible, not them. Even if they're in the space, even if they're a mortgage vendor, you are responsible for what they do.
Right. Yep. This is all great knowledge. And then next time we hop on, we'll have to talk about compliant marketing strategies that are working now, since we had to go down this bummer rabbit hole. But I'd rather people address this up front and not get a $50,000 fine or $1 million fine, like you said some people have, than just say, you know what? All my stuff's one click away. That's what I was told is good on social media, so I'm good. No, don't take that approach right now. It's not worth it. Maybe when the regime changes, if it does, then all this stuff goes away. But do you really want to risk it now?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. It really just depends on who's, what the appetite is for compliance.
Exactly. Well, awesome, man. Well, thank you for being on the podcast. It's always a pleasure. And hopefully this helps some people watching and make sure they don't commit any of these fraudulent claims that in the eyes of the compliance gods, right?
Be better, not best. Be better.
Be better.